Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to this month's Connect with Control-M. My name is Trinidad Gaitan. I'm a technical support analyst based in the Americas supporting Control-M. Today, we'll be looking at activating communication with Microsoft Active Directory over SSL. This is the agenda for the session. We'll start by checking the architecture involved in the setup, followed by the requirements. Next will be the demo, followed by a review. After that, I will go over some resources such as knowledge articles and online documentation. And finally, we will have the Q&A session. I would like you to recall that the Ask a Question tab is at the bottom of your player, and you can either enter your question at any time of this presentation. Let's discuss the architecture. This is the architecture setup for clients logging into the Enterprise Manager with Active Directory credentials. The authentication request is started in the Control-M client and it's sent to the Enterprise Manager. The Enterprise Manager components then forward the request to the LDAP server via TCP or SSL. Recently, Microsoft has released a patch that forces Active Directory to only accept LDAP connections over SSL, meaning any connections over TCP will not be successful. After this patch is installed on your Active Directory server, the Enterprise Manager will receive a connection refused error if it is configured to use TCP. This will prevent users from logging in with their Active Directory credentials. This patch only affects the connection between Enterprise Manager and the LDAP server. The connection from the client to the Enterprise Manager can remain in TCP mode if you desire. Let's go over the requirements for enabling SSL. First, the LDAP server must have a certificate with the complete certificate chain, and you will need to obtain the SSL port that will be used. For this, you will want to consult with your LDAP administrator. Next requirement is that the Enterprise Manager is able to connect to the Active Directory server on that SSL port and that the certificate is valid to establish a secure LDAP connection. This is what will be demonstrated during the demo. First, the tool LDP.exe will be used. This is a Microsoft executable. It can test connectivity to an Active Directory server using SSL and validate the certificate. Next, the certificate will be exported from the LDAP server, and OpenSSL will be used to convert it to the supported format. OpenSSL will also be used on the Enterprise Manager machine to test connectivity to the LDAP server using the certificate that we will export. Once the tools confirm that connectivity is successful, LDAP over SSL will then be enabled in the Configuration Manager. I will be demonstrating this in both Windows and Linux. All right, and now I'll be starting the demo. Let me go ahead and share my lab. This is the Active Directory server that I'll be using in this demonstration. The first thing we'll be looking at is a certificate that we will export. To do this, you go to Start, Administrative Tools, look for Certification Authority, and then you can double-click to open it up. And I'll be closing the administrative tools. It's no longer needed. Now here on the left side, you should see the domain that you'll be enabling SSL for. You'll want to select it, right-click, and go to the Properties. And here in the General tab, you can see the certificate that we'll be using for this demonstration. In your environment, you may have more than one certificate. If that's the case, be sure to consult with your LDAP administrator as far as which certificate you should use. Now, before we export this, I do want to confirm that the certificate can establish a connection to the Active Directory server. To do this, I'll be using ldp.exe. And to launch this, I'll go to the command prompt, and I'll simply type ldp and hit enter. This is how the application first looks. At the moment, the screen is blank since it's not connecting to anything. To establish a connection, you'll go to Connection, go to Connect, which should be the first option, and the connection window comes up. Here in the server value field, you'll use the host name of your Active Directory server. For the port, we'll be using 636 for this demonstration. This port may be different in your environment. You'll want to consult with your LDAP admin for this port. And then make sure that the checkbox for SSL is enabled. After that, you'll hit OK. And these are the results from the connection. And as you can see, we can't see the certificate, which means the connection was successful. And that concludes the everything I'll be using with ldp.exe. So I'll go ahead and close this out. And now we'll move back to exporting the certificate. To export, you'll want to hit the button View Certificate. I did mention earlier that the certificate must have the full certificate chain. To verify it has this, you can go to Certification Path. In our example, we just have the one certificate. If you have more, just make sure you consult with your LDAP administrator for which one you should export. And to export, go to the Details tab. You'll hit the button Copy to File. And that will bring up the certificate export wizard. The first screen is just a welcome message. You can just hit Next at this point. The screen after that is the format that the certificate will be exported in. This part is very important. The Enterprise Manager only supports a PKCS format with the .PEM extension. Microsoft is not able to export the certificate in this format, so what we'll be doing is selecting base64 encoded X509. At a later point, the certificate will be converted to the supported format. Once you select the base64 encoded X509, go ahead and hit Next. You'll be prompted now for the file name and path, and I'll be hitting the Browse button. I'm going to place this on the desktop, and I'll simply name the file AD, and then I'll hit Save. Verify that the file path and name is correct, and then hit Next. And for the last screen, this is just a summary of the settings you selected. Once again, just make sure the file format is base64 encoded X509. And now we can hit Finish. And a small message comes up saying the export was successful. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the desktop, the AD file was created. Those are all the steps for exporting the certificate, so I'll be closing all these windows now. Just hit OK. The next step will be to convert the certificate to the supported format. To do that, I will be using an open SSL command. Give me a moment to get that command. This is the command that we'll be using. It's OpenSSL X509. You'll use the switch -in and specify the file that we just exported. And then you'll use the switch -out in order to name the file that will be created. Now, it's very important that the file name you use is em_ldap_ssl.pem. This is the file name that the Enterprise Manager is expecting to find. If this file has a different name and you attempt to enable LDAP over SSL, the Enterprise Manager will not be able to locate it and the connection will fail. Now, to create the certificate, we'll just hit Enter now. And as you can see on the left side, the file has been created. And this includes all the steps I'll be doing on the Active Directory server. Next, we'll be moving to the Enterprise Manager. And I already moved the file in advance in order to save time. So now we'll be going to the Enterprise Manager that I have running on Windows. And as you can see here in the File Explorer, the file has already been placed here, em_ldap_ssl.pem. I do want to point out the directory that this file is in. It's the Enterprise Manager home directory /keystore. This is very important as well. If you place the file in a different directory and enable LDAP over SSL, the Enterprise Manager will not be able to locate the file and the connection will fail. I would also like to point out that if you have high availability set up with a primary and a secondary Enterprise Manager, this file needs to be placed on both servers manually, and the same if you have distributed control M Enterprise Managers, such as a workload archiving server. Now we'll be using another OpenSSL command to confirm that the Enterprise Manager can connect to the Active Directory server using the certificate. Let me grab that command. One moment. This is the command we'll be using. It's OpenSSL s_client. You'll use the switch -connect and specify the host name of the Active Directory server and the SSL port. Then you'll use the switch-ca file and specify the certificate that we exported and converted. So now I'll hit enter. And it looks like from the message that it did not connect successfully. So let's review the command again. And after reviewing it, I can see that the SSL port is not correct. It's 633, and it should be 636 for this demonstration. And once again, this port may be different for your environment. Just consult with your LDAP administrator. And now let's run the command again. And the certificate is displayed. And you can see that the connection was successful. And now that we've confirmed that the Enterprise Manager can connect to the Active Directory server, we will now enable LDAP over SSL in the Configuration Manager. Okay, to enable LDAP over SSL, you'll select the Enterprise Manager component, select System Parameters. On the left side, go to the LDAP tab. Select the domain that you'll be enabling SSL for. In this example, we only have one. And then you'll update the transmission protocol from TCP to SSL, and then update the port. 636, hit enter, and now we will activate these changes. And as you can see, a message comes up, and in the message it says, domain connected successfully, directory service configuration was set up, LDAP authentication is enabled successfully, and this is for both the GUI server and the CMS. And that concludes my steps for the Windows Enterprise Manager. Now I'll be showing this in Linux. So I'm going to close this now and minimize it. And this is my Enterprise Manager running on Linux. As you can see, the file has already been moved here, em_ldap_ssl.pem. And I do want to point out the directory that this file is in. It is slightly different than Windows. For Linux, it's the Enterprise Manager home directory /etc/keystore. And once again, if this file is not in this directory, LDAP over SSL will not connect successfully. So now that the file is here, let's go to the Configuration Manager for this Enterprise Manager and enable LDAP over SSL. And as you can see on the right side of the screen, the operating system is Linux. And now we'll be doing the same steps that we did for the Windows Enterprise Manager. Select the EM component, go to System Parameters, select the LDAP tab, select your domain, and then update the transmission protocol from TCP to SSL. And once again, we'll update the port. Now hit Activate Changes. Let's see, this time we did get an error. Domain failed to connect. LDAP configuration was not set up correctly. Check your log files. Failed setting authentication mode. Let's go back to the Enterprise Manager running on Linux, and let's take a look at the file permissions. Now the permissions on this file right now are 400, and the owner of the file is root. In order for the Enterprise Manager to use the certificate, the Enterprise Manager user must have read access to this file. So in this situation, you can either give the file the permissions of 444 or change the owner of the file to the Enterprise Manager user. In this case, I will be changing the owner of the file. Look at the permissions again. And the permissions are the same 400, but now the owner of the file is the Enterprise Manager user. Let's go ahead and go back to the Configuration Manager for this. Now the Activate Changes button is grayed out. In order to activate it again, we had to make a small change. In this case, I'll be changing from SSL to TCP and then back to SSL. And then we'll hit Activate Changes. And now we see the same message that we did for the Windows Enterprise Manager. Domain connected successfully. Directory service configuration was set up. LDAP authentication is enabled successfully. And the same for the CMS as well. And that concludes the steps for the demonstration. Let me go back to the presentation now. Here's a quick review of the demo. LDP was used to validate the certificate that was exported from Active Directory, and then the certificate was exported. Next, OpenSSL was used to convert the certificate from X509 to PKCS. After that, OpenSSL was used to test connectivity with the cert we converted, and then LDAP was enabled over SSL in the configuration manager for both a Windows and Linux environment. All right, these are the resources you can use regarding this presentation. The first one is the online documentation, obtaining a certificate file from the Windows Active Directory server. These are the steps that I took, that I performed on the Active Directory server in order to export the certificate and convert it. The next two resources are knowledge articles. The first one is troubleshooting communication with LDAP server over SSL, and the next one is how to enable debug for LDAP authentication. Thank you for attending this presentation. I hope the information provided was useful.